In September of 2023, I was traveling from Philly to Las Vegas to compete in a karate tournament. My travels had taken me all across the country, and I had grown accustomed to staying with whichever teams were also competing to save money. However, this time was different. For various reasons, I had to stay alone. I hastily booked an Airbnb not far from the Vegas Strip. In my rush, I didn't realize that the neighborhood wasn't the greatest. I briefly considered canceling and finding another place, but I rationalized that it was close to everything I needed and I wouldn't be spending much time there anyway. When I arrived at the location, the host was nowhere to be seen. The Airbnb profile picture was of a flower, so I wouldn't have known who to look for anyway. The host had given me a key code to access the room, a small studio apartment that shared a wall with the host's house. The studio had only one door in and out. The first red flag was the key code, 12345567. It seemed bizarre, but when I saw that the Wi-Fi password was password, I figured the host must be an older person who wasn't tech savvy. Despite the oddities, the room had good reviews. Around 9:30 p.m, things took a sinister turn. I was drifting off to sleep when I heard a tapping on the window directly in front of my bed. The drapes were drawn, so I couldn't see who or what was making the noise. I called out, "Huh?" loud enough for whoever it was to hear. The tapping stopped for a minute or two before resuming. This time, I called out, "Hello?" louder, and the noise ceased once again. On edge, I messaged the host, asking if it was them tapping on the window. An hour later, they finally responded, "I was going to bring you some water, but it seemed like you were asleep, so I left." I knew I wouldn't be able to sleep. My mind raced with thoughts of going for a walk to the store or taking a shower to clear my head, but a gut feeling told me to stay put. About 45 minutes later, around midnight, I heard noises outside the studio. Then, the unmistakable sound of someone trying the key code on my door filled the room. The first attempt failed, but I could hear them trying again. This time, I heard the lock disengage. The door was unlocked. Panic surged through me. I threw off the blankets and ran to the door. Just as it began to open, I slammed it shut with all my might, shouting, "This is my room! Get out of here! Leave!" From the other side of the door, a deep voice responded, "Jenna said this is my room." Jenna was the name of the host. Fear and adrenaline coursed through me as I repeated my demands and called the police, making sure to speak loud enough so the intruder knew I was on the phone. The police arrived, their expressions betraying a lack of surprise at my story. They said they would stay until my Uber arrived. The host, Jenna, was combative and unapologetic. Their explanation for who the intruder was changed multiple times. When the Uber finally arrived, I jumped in, feeling an immense relief wash over me as we drove away. Yet, a chill lingered. I never saw the face of the person who tried to enter my room. The realization dawned on me. If the host knew I was flying in from the East Coast, the 9:30 p.m. tapping on the window would have been equivalent to 12:30 a.m. for me, with the attempted break-in occurring around 3 a.m. It seemed meticulously planned. Was it just a robbery or something far more sinister? The thought still haunts me, especially since I never saw who was behind the door. My boyfriend, Sean, and I went on a trip to Vermont in the summer of 2023. I booked us a stay in an Airbnb that was listed as an off-grid cabin. It had a few hundred reviews with a 5-star rating, so I didn't think it looked sketchy. The cabin was an old one-room cabin with a potbelly stove and a loft area. There was no electricity, and it was in a remote part of Vermont down an old dirt road. There was one house about half a mile away that was owned by the host, and she was away, so we were alone. We got there around 4 p.m. and had a really nice evening cooking dinner and playing board games by candlelight. We had hiked all day and were exhausted by 10, so I went up to the loft to sleep while my boyfriend decided to sit outside and smoke. About 20 minutes later, while I was in that space between deep sleep and consciousness, I was jolted awake by a large banging sound on the side of the cabin. Before I could yell down, Sean yelled up to me, asking if that was me. Confused and feeling like I must be dreaming, I groggily yelled, "No, was that you?" He said no, but didn't seem too worried since he was sitting outside and didn't see anyone. We go camping frequently, so it takes a lot for us to get freaked out by random noises in the night. We figured it was probably a tree branch that broke off and fell against the cabin. I started to fall asleep again when there was another loud bang, like a thwacking sound, from another part of the cabin. At this, I jumped out of bed and climbed down from the loft. I met Sean as he was coming through the door. He told me to grab all the sharp things that I could find and go back into the loft. He was putting on a calm demeanor, but I could tell he was a little freaked out. I asked him what he thought it was, and he cautiously said that he didn't know. He said he didn't see anything when he was outside, but he thought he might have heard footsteps. As we were whispering, we heard a small, slow scraping noise that trailed for about 3 feet against the wall of the cabin, then silence again. I was pretty scared at this point and didn't know what to do. Our car was parked about 100 feet away from the cabin, so we would have to face whatever was out there in the dark in order to get to it, which is probably what they wanted. I was also afraid that if this was a human, they might have done something like slash the tires or block our ability to get back down the driveway. Sean told me to stay very quiet and go back up to the loft while he sat downstairs and waited. He had a hunting knife and a large stick, and I had a few steak knives, but otherwise, we were sitting ducks. The downstairs of the cabin had huge windows on 3 walls, half of which were just screens, so if someone was outside, they could easily be watching us, or could slash through the screen to get inside. I wanted to stay downstairs, but Sean ordered me to go upstairs, saying that it would be easier to fight this guy without me there, if it came to that. I went up and sat in the middle of the bed, clutching an array of knives in my fists. I don't think I ever listened so intently before. Sean yelled out, "Hello?" to see if he could get any response, or perhaps scare away whatever it was, if it was an animal. We heard nothing for what felt like 20 minutes. Then the scraping sound came back, much louder, like someone was dragging a rake or a hoe across the side of the cabin. I heard clear, methodical footsteps trailing off around the side of the cabin. Sean then came up to the loft and pulled the ladder up. He said he didn't like how they could see him, but he couldn't see them, and if they came in the cabin, he could at least get the jump on them from up here. We sat on the bed in silence. I was looking at him in terror. It was probably around midnight at this point, and I realized that we were going to be stuck in that cabin until morning. The noises continued and intensified. There was more banging that seemed to be coming from all different sides of the cabin. Intermittently, the scraping returned. This could not have been an animal. The sounds were too methodical. We didn't hear any grunting, like there was a bear or bobcat, and there were constant footsteps, pacing footsteps. There was a clear crunch of one foot going in front of the other, all around the sides of the cabin. There would be pauses of 10 to 20-minute intervals, then it would all start up again. At one point, there was a strange rattling sound on the outside, like someone was trying to shake or climb the pipe on the outside of the cabin that fed into the potbelly stove. This carried on for hours. Sean and I just lay in that bed, paralyzed in silent fear, staring into each other's terrified faces. I kept waiting to hear the front door burst open or the screen window rip. I was convinced that we were both about to be murdered, and every gruesome possibility kept playing in my head. I have never been that terrified, but no one ever came into the cabin. We never heard any voices, whispers, deranged giggling, or anything. Just the loud scraping, banging, rattling, and footsteps. Finally, around 5 in the morning, we started to hear roosters in the distance, and the loft was slowly lit by early dawn light. The sounds finally stopped. I got about 2 hours of sleep because we had to drive to Pennsylvania later that day. My car was thankfully fine, and we packed everything up as quickly as possible to get the heck out of there. Sean looked around the cabin, trying to find scraping marks or clear footprints, but there was nothing. I messaged the Airbnb host to tell her about our experience, and she said it must have been a porcupine. If you could find a porcupine that makes loud banging noises and can walk like a human, let me know. To this day, we debate about what it could have been. Sean thinks it was a crazy local trying to scare us away. Either way, I'm really glad I was not murdered that night. I once booked an Airbnb by myself in an area in New Jersey where I had a job interview. Since it was so far from home, I made a short trip out of it. I went with this one specific Airbnb because it was much cheaper than any hotels I could find. It was about half an hour away from where I'd be interviewing, which was fine with me. It was off some dead-end secluded road and had a nice view of the desert in the backyard. I brought my laptop with me to get work done at my, at the time, current job during the day, so that kept me busy most of the days I was there. I stayed for 3 days. My interview was on the second day that I was there, which was a Tuesday. I would be leaving Friday. So, On Monday, the night before my interview, I was practicing interview questions for this specific company and just generally getting some last-minute knowledge on their firm. I was doing this on my laptop in the living room of the little house probably around 9 p.m. and there was a tap at the window. I say tap because it wasn't exactly a knock. It sounded more like it could have been someone's finger. My head, of course, swung to the left to look at the window in reaction. I didn't see anyone, but it was also pitch black outside. I was kind of scared to look out the window, but I had to be a man and just do it, and there was no one as far as the eye could see, just darkness. Of course, maybe it could have been a bug hitting the window. We've got some pretty nasty bugs here after all. The next day, I got through my interview and thought I did pretty well. For the rest of my little trip there, I explored different parts of the town in my car, ate at different restaurants, and sat in the backyard and relaxed in the sun. Little did I know, I was likely being watched while I was in the backyard. At night, I was inside watching Breaking Bad on Netflix when it happened again, a single tap at the window. Now it was obvious it wasn't a bug. I was even more disturbed now, but once again, I rushed to the window. Even though I saw no one, that didn't mean someone wasn't out there. I checked the windows by the front door, then opened the door and looked outside for a second. Since there was no one there, I went back inside and then went to the back door. I stepped outside onto the back porch and looked out to the desert behind the house, silence and darkness. Then I heard a click, a sound someone made like clicking their tongue at the roof of their mouth. It was off in the distance beyond the light from the house. It was out somewhere in that cold desert. I felt as though someone could be hiding behind any number of those bushes, watching me and toying with me. I yelled out, and almost as if they did it in response, there was another click. I pinpointed the direction it came from and looked that way. I could see someone now standing not too far away, dressed in dark clothes, blending into the darkness of the desert. I started walking a little closer, then stopped, realizing I didn't want to get any closer to that person. I called out, "You're on private property. I'm going to call the cops if you don't leave." And I saw the person eerily quickly walk away. I theorized it was the Airbnb owner, but obviously that was a stretch and I didn't really know what to actually think. The night following, I was in my bed on my laptop watching Breaking Bad again before going to bed. I think I watched 2 episodes, so I was doing this for about an hour and a half. I didn't hear any noises in the house, though I was definitely giving thought to that encounter from earlier while watching the show. When I finally turned off the light in the room and tried to fall asleep, within 10 seconds, there was a click sound again, muffled from the inside of the closet. I looked at the closet door, which was open just a crack. Then, in a pretty natural response, I sprang off the bed, still in my PJs, and ran to the car. I sat in the driveway with the car running and called 911. I stared at the house as I spoke to the dispatcher, waiting to see if someone would come out because all of my stuff was still in there. A police car arrived, and upon entering the house, we did a quick investigation of the house together. It was very small, with not many places to hide. Conclusively, I still packed my stuff and left that place that night for a nearby hotel. I contacted both Airbnb and the host, and I was only able to get a partial refund for my stay. I still think it may have been the host of the Airbnb. I mean, who else would have access to the house? There were no signs of forced entry, which leads me to believe whoever it was may have had a key. But maybe I'm wrong. Maybe it was a stranger who snuck in at an opportune time.